Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bruce Nix. I am Director of Business Agility for Vaco, located in Memphis, Tennessee. And today we are kicking off what I am hoping is the first in a series of uh, fantastic episodes related around the space of business agility. And our first guest today is a leader in that space. He is also a close friend of mine and a co-founder of our local Memphis Agile Meetup. And his name is Steven Voyles, and he is the Chief Enablement Officer of the 334 Group. And Steven, welcome. Definitely appreciate you taking some time out today and being our first guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bruce. I'm glad to be here.
So why don't we kick this off for those people that aren't familiar with who you are and the 334 Group? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the 334 Group?
Yeah, sure. So I started the 334 group in 2018. I've been working with Agile teams since about 2003, mostly in Agile software development for the first 6 or 7 years. I think I started, that was mostly working with Agile transformations with companies that I had been working for. I started doing consulting full-time in 2008-ish. Really just wanted to broaden the landscape and be able to help more people. And so, I found that with consulting, I was able to go around and be with more customers and more companies within the same time frame. And so that really is what drove me in that direction. And I ended up working for a company called Rally Software, where I learned a ton and a lot of the inspiration for some of the stuff that I do today. That company was acquired a few years ago, and just realized the company that acquired them wasn't going to be aligned with me from a values and principles perspective. And so I started the 334 group so I could continue that mission of, kind of trying to help organizations become more adaptive organizations and be able to respond to change in a much better way. And so, yeah, it's been going great since then.
Fantastic. Yeah, Rally is a fantastic company. They were always definitely the leaders in the agile and business agility space. So I'm sure you were able to gain a lot of great experience and insights there. And I know, Rally, speaking of Rally, they were definitely always a leader, early adopter of many of the principles that we practice today in business agility. And one of those is OKRs, objectives and key results. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with OKRs and kind of what that path is, what got you interested in OKRs as opposed to some other method?
Yeah, sure. So actually, we weren't using OKRs at Rally, but I did start looking into them during that time. And so basically, like I said, I had realized at some point that the technology, so Agile software development, the technology groups typically weren't the biggest constraints in the organization, or if they were, by that point we had done it so much that we had all these great patterns for how to make those groups more adaptive. And so really quickly within the organization, the way we manage, the way we do finance, the way we do strategy. And so those were really the big constraints, and I wanted to start working on those. So I started looking at some of the different frameworks that were out there for, how to structure an organization and create incentives and create a management practice and an environment that allowed for these adaptive practices to flourish. Because what we were finding was we were doing great with agility in the software development, the IT space, but then as soon as it came up against the way that we planned projects or the way we funded anything, we started to have some problems. And so I found John Doerr's book. It's called Measure What Matters. And so John Doerr worked for a guy named Andy Grove at Intel. So Andy Grove is considered kind of the father of OKRs. I think he was, loosely based this on Peter Drucker's management by objectives, but had made some adjustments to it to better fit the work that they were doing at Intel. And once I was done with John Doerr's book, I kind of said, all right, this is it, right? This is the framework that I've been looking for. I think this is something that will resonate with leaders, while at the same time kind of reinforcing some of those principles and practices that we want to be doing as adaptive organizations.
Okay. So, you talked a little bit about OKRs as being a means of measurement. But can you maybe take a little bit deeper dive into exactly what OKRs R. That's a
Yeah, sure.
little challenging to kind of put an R at the end of the R.
Right.
But and then I mean, how are they different from how organizations track progress today? We always hear about KPIs, which are
Right.
always the key performance indicators, and that always comes up in conversations with leaders and organizations. So how are OKRs different from, say, KPIs?
Sure. So first, foundationally, for those that may not be familiar, OKR stands for, the O is objectives, and the KR is key results. And so the objectives is, that's how you describe something that you want to accomplish, and then key results are the things that you use to measure how well you're doing at accomplishing that objective. And so I think the way that it's different from things like KPIs, I think KPIs are great in terms of measuring how we're doing across different indicators in our industry. But they're missing some of the key components that I think OKRs provides. And so I think, you know, the thing that really drew me to OKRs was, like I said, the alignment with the consistency of the agile practices and the values that I wanted to create within the organizations I was working with.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a lot there, but I think really the three main things were, first, they're inspirational. And so while KPIs gives us these things that we're going to measure, one, they're not typically necessarily tied to individuals or group departments, right? Um, they're also not very inspiring, right? It's just this number that we're trying to hit. And that doesn't really motivate people very well if there's just some random number that we're trying to hit and I don't understand the why behind it, right? And so I think when we talk about writing objectives, we want them to be, first, aspirational. So it's something we're really stretching to get to, but also inspirational. And so, one of the classic examples that we use to talk about OKRs, or the objectives at least, is if you think back to the 60s, John F. Kennedy's speech about going to the moon, right? He said, we're going to go to the moon in the next decade. And a lot of us are kind of jaded, I think, with that now, with all the, I grew up watching the space shuttle launch. Now we have SpaceX, and it seems, we've got the International Space Station. But in the 60s, the idea that we were going to send human beings to the moon and bring them back alive was unthought of, right? Nobody thought it was possible. And so you can probably imagine, if you were an engineer or a scientist working at NASA in the 60s, John Kennedy just got on, President Kennedy just got on television and told everybody we're going to send people to the moon.
Right.
That tends to get you fired up and focused, right? And so I think just that aspect of it is a really, really powerful component of just the idea of OKRs, is intentionally writing the objectives in a way that not only tells people what we want to accomplish, but gives them a reason why we want to do it. And so I think that's really the first one. And I think the second thing that I really love about OKRs is this built-in idea of transparency. And so while things like KPIs might be somewhat public, OKRs are intended to be, typically when we're working with organizations, I'll start really small with one group or
Hmm.
one team, but we end up taking them broadly throughout the organization. And throughout that whole process, we make everyone's OKRs transparent. So whether you're the CEO or whether you're an individual contributor, your OKRs, your team's OKRs are completely open and available for anybody to read. And I think that's a great tool to create alignment throughout the organization. It's clear to everyone what everyone else is working on, how it affects them, how they can help. And it's easy for me to find that information because we put it somewhere that's easy to access and it's transparent. And that's something that we can do very easily. It also helps to keep people aligned and focused on the goals of the organization. Because, just to tell a story, I've been in, I can't tell you how many meetings where there was an argument about the direction of a project or an initiative. Doing that, like, that's not important to us as an organization. Look, right here, it says it. And
Right.
our OKRs are based on that as well. And so I don't think we should be focused on what you're talking about. Let's shift and do this other thing because that will drive our objectives better than what we're talking about in this meeting. And so that transparency is huge. And I think the third thing is this focus on outcomes. So KPIs are great, and a lot of the other metrics-based frameworks are great. except I tend to see, at least as they get implemented, a lot of task-based outcomes, right? And so
Hmm.
it's we want to drive revenue by 20%, and so we're going to launch a project or an initiative that's intended to do that. And as long as I successfully complete that project, that's a win, right? Um, and Bruce, I know, as you know, that's not always how it works in real life, right?
Right.
Just getting the project done doesn't always, when those ideas hit market, a lot of times things change, or things that we didn't expect to happen, and we're not driving the outcomes that we want. And
Hmm.
so one of the things that we're always really clear about when we're working with customers with key results is that they have to be something that you're actually measuring that's making an impact on your customer or your business or the marketplace, right? It's not just we get credit for completing something. It's the intent of this, of measuring this key result as it's tied to this objective, is to drive website traffic 20% higher, right? And it's really easy to measure. Did we do that or not, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so in that way, we're really focused on the outcome that we're trying to achieve, not just we did our best with an intention to achieve that outcome.
Right. So it's the outcome over output
Right,
conversation,
right.
right? I mean, the output, the work can certainly support the outcome, but the work isn't important unless we actually deliver an outcome.
Exactly.
And I really like the idea of it being inspirational, tying back to your your John F. Kennedy story. Is I believe, and it was somewhere, I'm not sure where I heard it, but even during that time, that because it was such an aspirational goal, it created this ownership in that launch. And
Yeah.
there was a story where there was a group of people going through NASA, and they came across a janitor. They didn't know he was a janitor, but they asked him, what do you do here? He said, I help I help put men on the moon. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, you have this
Cool.
person who, or, on the surface, somebody would think, well, he's very good. He maintains the appearance of the space, but it created that ownership in it. I think that's
Right.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great. And the
yeah.
inspirational part of that too, I think, is key. The ownership is great, but being inspiring and making sure. So if you can't think of an inspiring statement, I work with leaders all the time on this, right? If you're sitting here telling me as we're writing this objective that you can't think of an inspiring way to write it, let's talk about whether or not it's really important, right?
Right.
Because
Exactly.
nobody in your company, the janitor is not going to walk around and tell people when they ask what he does here, right? He's not going to say, "I'm here to cut costs by 30%." Like,
Yeah.
that's nobody's going to get excited about that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what results have you seen, as we talk about this ownership and going into an organization and being able to, looking at an organization from where they started to when you go in and you've implemented some actual OKRs, and then you've come back for, maybe a check-in. What have been some of the key differences in results that you've seen moving from an old traditional way of measurement to OKRs?
Yeah, so I think it's really those three things that I talked about, honestly. I tend to see a lot more motivation behind everyone, right? So people understand the why behind what we're trying to accomplish. And so therefore, people are a lot more excited about trying to do it, and a lot more connected to the purpose of their jobs. And there's a litany of research out there that'll talk to us about how purpose drives motivation and gets people engaged.
Mhm.
And these days, with the numbers that we're seeing on surveys with employee engagement, anything that we can do in that department is helpful. But I see huge increases in employee engagement in the customers that we do this with. Um, I think the transparency is big. The alignment within the organization, you see a lot less wasted effort on things that aren't really important, but might be a departmental thing. And also, I think the process of writing the OKRs, and I don't want to get down in the weeds on how we do this, but the process includes a feedback cycle where everybody in the organization can see everyone else's OKRs, and we can have conversations when maybe, Bruce, I see that you wrote this objective. That's not really in alignment with what we're doing. Or during those conversations, sometimes you find groups, we highly encourage this, where they share OKRs. So, I need something from the finance department in order to get something done. If it's not one
Mhm.
of their OKRs, they're very unlikely to get incredibly motivated to make sure that I have what I need, right? But if we
Okay.
share that thing, so this sense of camaraderie and teamwork that it drives too, because we know we're marching towards the same goal and we're going to get measured in the same way.
Right.
So, a great example of kind of working with several years ago where the ecom department there was, they were primarily incentivized by driving leads to the website, like increasing the number of leads coming in, and they were dropping those to sales, right? Well, it turned out that in that organization, their sales operations group was actually really short-staffed, and they were having trouble actually getting to customers in time. So I think the numbers were in their industry, something like 90% of leads had signed a contract with someone within 2 days. And their salespeople were contacting most people that they were getting in touch with. It was taking 3 days or more. So literally, the ecom group was, and they had started writing OKRs before we were working with them, but they had OKRs about driving leads to a sales department that was already dropping 90% of them on the floor and not even getting to them before they had signed a contract with somebody.
Yeah.
And so getting that group to share OKRs and moving to a place where they were driving towards the same results, not just looking out for themselves, was huge.
Okay. Nice. So, and hearing you talk through that, it sounds like some of the challenges with implementing OKRs, one, not, just the basic understanding of them notwithstanding, but actually making sure people understand what that alignment is between the strategy and the execution, but also probably that transparency aspect. It sounds like as well is definitely one of the challenges in just being able to share that knowledge. Would that be correct, or are there some other challenges that people should be aware of?
Yeah, no, I think those are definitely big. Especially when, a certain percentage of your OKR should be cascaded down from the higher level, right? So some of your boss's OKR should drive your OKRs, your team's OKRs. Not all of them, and again, we don't want to get into the weeds about why.
Right.
But also that idea of shared OKRs, that really drives alignment. And so there's an administrative burden there. It takes some time building that muscle memory and getting used to doing it. But honestly, the second one you mentioned, the transparency, that's the biggest one. So culturally, in most organizations, the idea that everybody can see what I'm supposed to be working on and everybody knows whether or not I'm doing it well,
Right.
that's usually the toughest one for people to get used to.
Yeah.
But, we're used to that, right? With agile transformations, those types of initiatives are always building adaptive organizations are always way more about changing the culture in that organization than handing them some new practices, right?
Yep. Okay. Good deal. Well, Stephen, I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight on this particular topic. Now, and I know in our Agile meetup next Thursday, you're going to be discussing this topic a little bit more in detail. So, but do you want to tell the people maybe how they can find out about you, about the 334 group, and about our Agile meetup, maybe a little bit more before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we're going to drop some links in the comments or somewhere that people can find it associated with the video. But yeah, so the meetup is the Memphis Agile meetup. The best way to find us, I think, is through the page. If you just go to LinkedIn and find the Memphis Agile meetup, the events are listed there. So the event we're going to next week will be a virtual meetup over Zoom. Primarily going to be focused on writing good objectives. So making sure that you're writing those things in a way that's inspirational and using the right language. And then if we've got time, we'll get into writing good key results. But I think we're going to probably stick with objectives. So yeah, if you guys are interested in this topic and you want to learn how to write better objectives for your organization, even if you're not using OKRs, I think the idea of making sure that you're writing objectives in a way that inspires and motivates people is helpful, right? So yeah, so come find us, sign up for the event. We'll see you next Thursday. In terms of reaching out to me or the 334 group, so we're just at the334group.com. You can also email us at either info@the334group.com or reach out to me directly, steven.voyles@the334group.com. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn and all the things, so I'm pretty easy to get in touch with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. I appreciate it. And you can also reach me at bnix@vaco.com. Pretty simple. And also just a quick for our Memphis Agile meetup, you can also hit us up on Twitter at Memphis Agile. And if you have any questions, reach out to us, and we look forward to doing many more of these. So if there's a topic any of you have in mind that's been burning a hole in your brain and want us to discuss it, reach out and let us know, and we'll be happy to bring it up and have some conversation on it. Stephen, thank you, and we will see you at the meetup.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. This was great. I appreciate you having me.
All right, thank you.